The Patterson family boardroom always felt cold, even in summer. Maybe it was the steel gray walls or the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Manhattan, but today it felt especially frigid. I sat at the massive oak table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching my father pace like a caged lion. Marcus Patterson wasn't used to waiting. As CEO of Patterson Industries for the past 30 years, he was used to others waiting for him. But today was different. Today, he had to wait for the family trust lawyer to arrive for what he thought would be a simple meeting, cutting off his only daughter from her inheritance. My brothers, James and Andrew, sat across from me, identical smirks on their faces. They'd always been Dad's golden boys, following his playbook to the letter. Business school, management training, corporate ladder climbing. Meanwhile, I'd chosen a different path. Finance, investment banking, private equity. Waste of time, Dad had called it. Real power is in running things, not counting other people's money. If only he knew. "Where is Harrison?" Dad snapped, checking his Patek Philippe watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "He's never late." "Traffic," I said softly, knowing exactly why our family lawyer was delayed. He mentioned having another meeting first. James snorted, probably trying to find a way to talk Dad out of this. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Not that it'll matter. I remained silent, thinking about the meeting I'd had with Harrison 3 months ago, right after I discovered what my brothers had been doing with the company's pension fund, the offshore accounts, the creative accounting, the massive loan they'd taken out to cover their tracks, a loan I now owned. The door opened, and Harrison walked in, his usual confident stride replaced by something more cautious. Behind him came another man, tall, sharp-suited, carrying a leather briefcase I recognized. "Mr. Patterson," Harrison said, his voice carefully neutral. "I apologize for the delay. This is Mr. Banks from Everett Capital Partners." He insisted on joining us. Dad frowned. "This is a family matter, Harrison. Why is there an outsider here?" Before Harrison could respond, I stood up, because I asked him to come. The room went silent. My father's eyes narrowed, that familiar look of disappointment crossing his face. "Olivia, what are you playing at?" Mr. Banks placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "Perhaps we should begin with the reason for today's meeting, Mr. Patterson. You wanted to discuss changes to the family trust." Dad straightened, regaining his composure. "Yes, simple changes. My sons will inherit equal shares of the trust and company leadership. Olivia will be removed entirely." "I see." Mr. Banks pulled out a folder. "And the reason for this change?" "She's not qualified," James cut in. "She abandoned the family business years ago, went off to play banker while we stayed and built something real." I almost smiled at the irony. Almost. "Actually," Mr. Banks said, laying out several documents, "we should discuss qualifications, particularly regarding the company's current financial position." Andrew leaned forward, his face darkening. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," I said quietly. "Tell them, Mr. Banks. Tell them who really owns Patterson Industries' debt now." My father's hand froze on his water glass. "What?" Mr. Banks cleared his throat. 3 months ago, Patterson Industries took out a $40 million loan to cover what was listed as operational expenses. This loan was secured against company assets, including the family trust holdings. Last week, that loan was purchased by a private investment group. "So," James snapped, What does that have to do with Olivia? I stood up slowly, placing my own folder on the table. The investment group is mine, James. I own your debt. All of it. The color drained from my father's face. That's impossible. You couldn't. Couldn't what, Dad? Couldn't figure out what they were doing? Couldn't trace the money? Couldn't afford to buy a $40 million loan? I opened the folder, revealing bank statements and transfer records. While you were busy dismissing me as just your disappointing daughter, I was building my own empire. And now, I own yours. James jumped to his feet. She's bluffing. She has to be. Mr. Banks shook his head. I assure you, she's not. Ms. Patterson's investment firm now holds controlling interest in your debt. And given certain irregularities we've discovered in the company's pension fund management, she would be within her rights to call that debt due immediately. The room erupted into chaos. James started yelling about family loyalty. Andrew slumped in his chair, his face ashen. But my father just stared at me, seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time in 20 years. Why? He whispered. Why do this? I picked up my phone, pulled up a video, and played it. The security footage showed James and Andrew in the company vault late at night, removing documents, replacing files. Because someone had to stop them, I said. Someone had to protect the people whose pensions they were stealing, the families they were destroying. I paused the video. I tried to tell you last year, remember? But you said I was just jealous of their success. Harrison cleared his throat. Mr. Patterson, given these revelations, perhaps we should postpone any changes to the trust until what? I cut in. Until they find another way to hide what they've done. No, we're going to handle this now. I turned to Mr. Banks. Show them the terms. He pulled out another document, this one thick with legal language. Ms. Patterson is prepared to restructure the loan, maintain the company's operations, and protect the pension fund on one condition. What condition? My father asked, his voice barely audible. I met his eyes. I take control. Full control. The company, the trust, everything. James and Andrew resign immediately, and you step down as CEO. You can't do this, James snarled. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't steal from their workers. Family doesn't destroy lives for profit. And family, I stood up, gathering my things, doesn't throw away their daughter without consequences. I headed for the door, then turned back one last time. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. After that, I call the loan, and everything you built comes crashing down. Oh, and Dad? I smiled, cold and sharp. It turns out I can read a financial statement after all. As I walked out, leaving them with their shock and their lawyers, I thought about the long game I'd played. The years of being underestimated, dismissed, pushed aside. They thought they were teaching me my place in the world. Instead, they taught me how to take their world apart. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of October day that makes Manhattan feel like it's made of glass and light. I sat in my corner office at Blackwood Investment Partners, 40 stories above the city, watching the sun glint off neighboring buildings while I waited. The antique clock on my wall, the only thing I'd kept from my old office at Patterson Industries, showed 8:57 a.m. The deadline I'd given my family was 9:00 a.m. 3 minutes until I found out if they were ready to face reality or if I needed to start dismantling their empire. Sophia, my assistant, buzzed through on the intercom. Miss Patterson? Your father is here. Alone. Interesting. Send him in. The door opened, and Marcus Patterson walked in. He looked older than he had yesterday, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. Gone was the commanding presence that had dominated boardrooms for 3 decades. In its place stood a man realizing his kingdom was built on sand. Olivia. He stopped a few feet from my desk, uncertain for perhaps the first time in his life. I didn't stand, didn't offer him a seat, just watched him, remembering all the times I'd stood in his office trying to earn a scrap of approval. The papers are signed, he said finally, placing a thick envelope on my desk. Full control of the company, the trust, everything. James and Andrew submitted their resignations this morning. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. Where are they? James is meeting with his lawyer. Andrew is probably at the airport by now. Said something about needing time to think. Running away, I translated. Like always. Dad flinched. They're still your brothers. Are they? I stood, walking to the window. When was the last time they acted like it? When was the last time any of you treated me like family? We were trying to protect you. I turned sharply. Protect me? By stealing from people's pensions? By cooking the books? By trying to cut me out of my inheritance? That's not. He started, then stopped. Sank into one of the leather chairs facing my desk. I didn't know about the pensions, about what they were doing. I should have. But you didn't want to see it. I finished. Just like you never wanted to see me. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. How long have you known about what they were doing? I walked back to my desk, pulled out a thick file. I started suspecting something last year when I was reviewing some market data. Patterson Industries reported earnings didn't match its cash flow patterns, so I dug deeper. Opening the file, I spread out documents across my desk. Bank statements, transfer records, emails between James and Andrew discussing how to hide their tracks. They started small, I continued. Skimming from the pension fund, using the money for personal investments. When those went bad, they took more to cover their losses. By the time I found out, they'd stolen nearly $30 million. Why didn't you come to me? I did. My voice was ice. Last Thanksgiving, remember? You said I was just trying to cause trouble, that I should focus on my own life instead of interfering with theirs. He remembered. I could see it in his face. So I did exactly that, I said. I built my own investment firm, made connections, waited for them to make their next move. When they took out that loan to cover the missing pension money, I was ready. And now, he asked quietly, what happens now? I sat back down, opened my laptop. Now I fix what they broke. The pension fund will be fully restored. The company will be restructured, transparent, ethical, and James and Andrew will face consequences. I met his eyes. I've already forwarded evidence to the SEC. They'll probably avoid jail time if they cooperate, but their careers in finance are over. He nodded slowly, looking suddenly ancient. And me? That depends, I said. Are you ready to finally see me? Really see me? I see you now, he whispered. God help me, I see you now. I pulled out another document, slid it across the desk. Then prove it. This is a consulting contract. 3 years, advisory role only. You help me clean up this mess, rebuild the company's reputation. But I'm in charge. He picked up the contract, hands shaking slightly. Why offer me anything? After everything. Because unlike them, you didn't steal. You were just blind. I paused. and because someone once told me that real power isn't just in taking control, it's in knowing when to show mercy. Who told you that? Mom did. I watched his face carefully. The day before she died, when she made me promise to watch over the family legacy. Not the money or the company. The values she thought we still had. For the first time in years, I saw tears in my father's eyes. She always saw things clearer than I did. Yes, I agreed. She did. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of missed opportunities and unspoken words. Finally, he picked up the pen I'd left next to the contract. If I sign this, he said, what guarantee do I have that you won't just destroy everything anyway? The same guarantee I had growing up, I replied. Not at all. You'll just have to trust me. Like I once trusted you. He signed. As he stood to leave, he turned back. The woman you've become, your mother would be proud. I know, I said softly. I just wish you had been too. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the signatures on the contracts that changed everything. The company was mine now. The trust, the legacy, everything they tried to take from me. But as I looked out over the city I'd conquered, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because taking control was one thing. Keeping it would be another battle entirely. 6 months passed like a storm. Fierce, transformative, and leaving nothing untouched in its wake. I sat in what used to be my father's office, now mine, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed just how much had changed at Patterson Industries. The pension fund was fully restored, with additional compensation for affected employees. Our corporate governance structure had been completely overhauled. Transparency initiatives were in place, and our stock price, after an initial drop when the scandal broke, was slowly climbing back up. But not everyone was happy with the new regime. Sophia knocked on my door. Miss Patterson? The board members are assembled for the quarterly meeting. I closed the report and stood, straightening my blazer. Thank you, Sophia. And the other matter? She handed me a thin folder. Just arrived. You'll want to see this before you go in. Inside was a letter from James's lawyer, demanding a review of his resignation terms, claiming coercion, threatening legal action. Typical James, always thinking he could bully his way back to power. I smiled, tucked the folder under my arm, and headed to the boardroom. The tension was palpable as I walked in. Half the board were old guard. My father's cronies who'd looked the other way for years. The other half were my appointments, ethical, sharp, and uncompromising. The divide was visible even in how they sat, clustered on opposite sides of the table. My father sat in the corner, quiet but watchful. In the past 6 months, he'd surprised me. He'd actually been helpful during the transition, providing insights into old agreements and relationships that needed attention. Maybe he was trying to atone. Maybe he just wanted to stay relevant. Either way, I'd keep him close. Trust, but verify. Another lesson learned the hard way. Good morning, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Let's begin with the quarterly numbers. For the next hour, we went through the standard updates. Revenue was stabilizing. New compliance measures were in place. Employee confidence was rising. Then came the part I knew would spark conflict. Now, regarding the proposed restructuring of our international operations, Ms. Patterson interrupted Harold Winston, one of the old guard directors. Before we continue, there's something the board needs to discuss. I raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, but pressing on. We've received, concerns about the pace and extent of changes being implemented. Some major shareholders feel. You mean James feels? I cut in. Let's not pretend this is coming from anywhere else. I received his lawyer's letter this morning. Murmurs around the table. Winston shifted in his seat. James represents significant family interests. James represents nothing, I said sharply. His shares are in trust pending the SEC investigation. He has no standing here. But the family legacy. The family legacy. I stood up slowly, placing both hands on the table, was nearly destroyed by the very people you're trying to defend. Or have you forgotten about the stolen pensions? The fraudulent reports? The families who almost lost everything? Silence fell. Even Winston looked away. I opened my laptop, turned it to face the board. Since we're discussing family interests, let me show you something. On the screen was a series of emails, old ones, dating back years, showing board members, including Winston, being warned about irregularities in the company's finances. Warnings they'd ignored. I've been very generous, I continued. When I took control, I could have cleaned house entirely, reported everyone who turned a blind eye. But I believed in second chances. I closed the laptop. Don't make me regret that decision. The message was clear. The old guard slumped in their seats. Now, I said, sitting back down, shall we return to the international restructuring? The rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly. Afterwards, my father lingered behind. That was well handled, he said quietly. I learned from watching you, I replied. The good and the bad. He nodded, understanding the double edge in my words. James won't stop, you know. He'll keep trying to find a way back in. Let him try. I gathered my papers. I'm not the same person he could push around anymore. No, my father agreed. You're not. He paused at the door. Your mother? She always said you were stronger than all of us combined. I never understood what she meant until now. I watched him leave, thinking about how much had changed, not just in the company, but in me. That evening, I had dinner with Harrison, our family lawyer, now one of my most trusted advisors. James filed the lawsuit, he said, passing me the documents. Claims emotional distress, undue influence, the usual desperate allegations. I skimmed the filing, then set it aside. Let him waste his money. We have everything documented. He's also been reaching out to old business partners, trying to rally support. I know. I sipped my wine. That's why I've been meeting with them myself. Amazing how quickly loyalty shifts when you show people proof they were being deceived for years. Harrison studied me over his glasses. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had to. I looked out the restaurant window at the city lights. They taught me that. Every time they dismissed me, underestimated me, pushed me aside, they taught me to plan 3 steps ahead. And now I make sure it never happens again. I turned back to him. The company moves forward. Ethical, strong, the kind of legacy my mother would have wanted. And your brothers? They made their choices. I shrugged. Now they live with the consequences. Later that night, I stood in my office, looking at an old family photo on my desk. All of us together, smiling, before greed and power had torn everything apart. I picked it up, then deliberately placed it in a drawer. That chapter was closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Competitors trying to take advantage of our past scandal. James's lawsuit to deal with. Old allies to manage and new ones to make. But I was ready. because they tried to write me out of the family story. Instead, I'd written my own ending. And this time, I held the pen.